Celeste Brooks. So Celeste is a predictive astrologer and coach. Her offerings include classes, workshops, coaching packages, events, and readings. She also helps people find unknown birth times through chart rectification. Her podcast, Celestial Insights, offers weekly guidance. Her popular Instagram lives provide astrological and intuitive insights. Celeste is a board member of OPA and a faculty member of Kepler College. She lectures internationally at astrology conferences. Before transitioning into astrology full-time, she had a successful sales and marketing career spanning over 25 years at Fortune 500 companies. She holds the STA's practitioner's level certification in Horary, and her website is at astrologybyceleste.com. And I know, Celeste, you're on all of the social medias from Instagram, Threads, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Blue Sky, which I've not even heard of. But if you look for at Astrology by Celeste, you can find all of those social medias and LinkedIn as well. And our next fantastic panelist, Shu. Shu is a consulting astrologer, teacher, and writer based in central Victoria, Australia, on the Dja Wurrung country. For Shu, astrology is not just a profession, but a way of life, influencing her work as a grower, beekeeper, and regenerative farmer. Drawing inspiration from Hermetic philosophy, she practices traditional astrology with a sky-centered approach. Shu's spiritual practice and cosmological perspectives are deeply rooted in her Taoist cultural heritage. Certified by the Melbourne School of Astrology and the School of Traditional Astrology in Horary and Traditional Medical Astrology, Shu operates an international consulting practice, lectures globally, teaches at Kepler College, mentors individual students, and writes weekly planetary news for the Intercycle Observator. And you can find Shu at intercycle.com, and Shu is also on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and you can see all the handles there. And on to our, let's see if it pops up. On to Stevie Lowe. Stevie is a California-based astrologer and Kepler College alumni, focusing on traditional studies, Hellenistic through Renaissance. You can find him in the consultation room and the digital hallways and classrooms at Kepler College. And of course, you can find Stevie when we do our monthly forecasts on YouTube. With a background in community organizing, he created Kepler's own Astro Trivia game show, a scholarship fundraising event. I highly recommend checking that out on our YouTube channel. He's the maker of a quarterly DIY Astro print zine called The Hour Marker, providing auspicious dates, horary mysteries, and interviews of rising astro colleagues. And to find out more, you can find Stevie at wilderastrology.com and on Instagram at the handle there. Okay, into today, and I think, Celeste, I think we have you to begin.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about the Aries Ingress, which I did a talk for Kepler back in April, and you can go and rewatch the talk if you'd like to see how the predictions for the year showed up. But I just wanted to summarize some things. So the Aries Ingress, when the sun enters the sign of Aries, when you cast it in a nation's capital, it can give you insight onto what is going to be coming up over the next year between April and April, the Ingress and the Ingress. And so it was cast for this year. And so one of the things I really talked about at the webinar was how the Scorpio rising, suggesting this intensity that the country was going to be experiencing, where people would be very like set in their views, and represented by Mars and Aquarius, right, by the IC. So we knew conflict would be a big story. And in the sign of Aquarius is this conflict of the group, technology. One of my predictions was there would be some kind of a big story around cyber attacks. And it was interesting. We were informed a couple of days before Mars stationed to go retrograde in the sign of Leo, right at 6 degrees of Leo, right near where the moon is in the 9th house here. And the 9th house rules, places overseas, as well as the moon rules the people. Mars stationed at 6 degrees to go retrograde, we found out that the Chinese hackers had invaded 8 telecom companies and have the texts and voicemails and phone logs for millions of Americans. So that's how this one showed up. Yeah, and another thing with the fourth house is the house of the opposition party, and Mars was great conjunct the USA moon as well, and the whole country saw the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. That was that happened 2 days before Mars met Uranus in the sign of Taurus. So that was very interesting about how this showed up. And Donald Trump's Mars, his natal Mars, is at 26 degrees of Leo. So really, really very on point of what we saw. Astrology being literal. I talked about that there would be some kind of diplomatic conflicts. And you see here the Venus Saturn, as well as our focus on overseas things. So these pictures here, I used them visually for things that came to my mind that would be coming up. And then underneath, I put text on how they showed up. Yeah. So another big thing, and there was so much about overseas affairs and Biden trying to push Israel into coming to a ceasefire. That never happened. The conflict between Ukraine and Russia, there being a lot about resistance, Venus ruling resources, and Saturn, constricting them. You can see that as well as, this Uranus in the 7th house, like this upheaval going on with our open enemies as well as our allies. The 7th house rules that. I got the image of Pandora's box on the day of the lunar eclipse in Pisces. We had the pager bombs going off all over Lebanon, where the Hezbollah fighters, their pagers exploded, and the next day the walkie-talkies did. So I get this Pandora imagery with that, and it was very interesting. In the news, it was talked about as being a Trojan horse type event, and that was another image for this year. This is the Trojan horse over here. So both of these, I feel like, relate to that story. And at the time, Mercury in Virgo at that lunar eclipse was opposite Saturn in the sign of Pisces. So Mercury in Virgo, these pagers, these communication devices, opposite Saturn, were disguised as just ordinary, but were actually, something that could hurt people. And Bernadette Brady has delineated all of the Saros cycles, and for the eclipses we just had, it was separation and loss and physical injury was a theme. And a lot of the people who had these pagers, like they lost their hands, and they had like literal physical injuries from these things going off. It was so eerie, and it felt like Pandora's box, where, oh my God, we've gone to this new level of fighting where now people need to be worried about everyday ordinary things like, your cell phone and your pager being turned into some kind of death machine. Okay. So Texas was another theme because the solar eclipse went through Texas, and there was this conflict, which also brings in themes of diplomatic conflict between President Biden and the governor of Texas over these border buoys, which were put to prevent people from entering the country. And you can see, so Venus rules the 12th house, and we can see this also. The 12th house rules things like prisons, places people would rather not be. It also has themes to me about refugees, people trying to sneak in, or migrants trying to sneak into the country. Saturn, these border buoys would cut people, and that feels like this Mars energy as well. The fourth house is the house of the land, putting these martial things there. Submarines were a theme. It happened in the spring, but we didn't find out about it till September, right about the lunar eclipse in Pisces, revealing all is revealed about C-type topics, where one of their submarines sank. Let me just read this to you. China's newest nuclear-powered submarine sank pierside in the spring, and the Chinese Navy tried to conceal the loss, according to 2 U.S. defense officials. So it was an attack submarine that was supposed to be this new big thing, and it sank, but we didn't find out about it till the fall. But you can think about that, as well as I feel like that's the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. Jupiter has associations with, overseas. Uranus, this thing to be an attack thing, and as well as all of this emphasis with the Pisces imagery in the sea. What else did I want to say? I thought the cicadas would be a bigger story, where there was the double brood was hatched in the summer, where the noises would be really driving people crazy, which it did. But a bigger insect story was that the mosquito-borne diseases that came to light at the lunar eclipse, like EEE. A couple of people have died from these mosquito-borne diseases. Like 2 days before the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction on April 20th, the Gaza protests, where people on college campuses, again, this ninth house theme, were building like tents, literal physical structures on the lawns of the campuses. It started at Columbia, but then spread across the country and even across the world in some cases. So we saw the protests with the Jupiter-Uranus, a lot of upheaval, a lot of protests. The Boeing strike and a port strike. So we saw this magnification of strikes, and I think that strikes are going to be a big story in 2025. Let's see, anything else did I miss? Oh, the balloon. What did I write down there? Let me just see what I wrote down there for the balloons. So when I put this balloon here, I was thinking about the Chinese balloons that were floating across, the country, that we found out about them. They always came to our attention with when Uranus was activated. But it's also a big theme from the movie Wicked, which to me, Wicked is so interesting that this has become a story right after the lunar eclipse in Pisces. It's a hit movie, with witches feeling like the Pisces Virgo axis. She flies on the broom, which is a Virgo type thing, and yeah. And so Wicked, as well as with right now, where there are all these drones all over parts of the country that people don't know what they are. It's causing all this confusion and fear, kind of thing, bringing these Scorpio themes to light again. Let me see, anything else? We also know with the sun sextile Pluto, Biden stepping down, and Kamala Harris being the one who is running. Let's see. Oh, and I thought something on subways might with the like this to me was like the Chicago L. But what we had was the Daniel Penny trial. He killed Jordan Neely on the subway, and that was a big story for the US that happened in New York City. The trial just finished around Mars retrograde, but also this was the Hurricane Milton evacuation, the day Jupiter stationed to go retrograde October 9th, and Pluto stationed to go direct the following day. We saw people like packed on the freeways, leaving, masses of people trying to get out of Florida because of the hurricane that came. Also, right now with Syria, we've seen like masses of people. Mercury's retrograde right now, and it's been opposing Jupiter retrograde. Masses of people trying to get home after the ceasefire over. Oh, after excuse me, not ceasefire. The leader was deposed. Okay, you can go to the next slide.
I just wanted to jump in, Celeste, and
Oh,
talk about
oh,
the. Can you hear me?
yes,
One of the forecasts we did, and I remember you talking about, I think, did we have a grand trine in water? And then you were
yes.
talking about late season hurricanes. And of course, we did have a late season. I'm here on the East Coast, and we had Helene, which was horrendous here in North Carolina and through the states. And just to bring that to your attention, because you mentioned that, I think, a month or two before.
Yeah, when we did the Libra Ingress, we did it early, and yeah, I talked about that. And if you go back one slide, yeah, so the Mars at the IC and Venus Saturn in the fourth house, that really brings themes of fire and water storms being a problem. And with this Saturn Neptune conjunction getting tighter and tighter. Yeah, there was a lot of things this year about the two huge hurricanes, as well as the, what do you call those things? Tornadoes. And right now there's a fire still burning, I believe, in Malibu. There's a big fire. So yeah, I think the big story, like climate change, is going to be one of the biggest stories of 2025, storms and strikes. And so I talked about Mars and Jupiter transits would be important because of Mars is representing the people. Jupiter was angular at the Aries ingress, and so this is how some of the things showed up. The Jupiter and Gemini with the breaking up square Saturn and Pisces. Pisces is associated with music. Saturn, is limiting things. And the DOJ sued to break up Ticketmaster and Live Nation about, all of that monopoly crushing price competition in the music industry. Also with Pisces highlighted, the Sean Diddy Combs, all of that stuff coming to light. I already talked about the Trump assassination attempt. Oh, and what happened on those dates in that mid-August was Donald Trump and Elon Musk had that 2-hour live on X. And the World Health Organization declared the monkeypox outbreak right around Mars conjunct Jupiter. Did you want to say something, Shu?
Oh, no. Sorry, have I got my hand up?
No, no, I
Sorry.
just heard you talking, or maybe breathing.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I'll mute my.
Uh, on October 9th, that was the Hurricane Milton with the travel chaos. On November 3rd, so I had talked about how I thought there was some kind of potential, like a weapon planted with the Chiron return and that solar eclipse at 19 degrees of Aries. that maybe if we didn't find it out before the election, there could be some problems. So we never found the weapon, but Mars opposite Pluto, we did have bomb threats from Russian emails, so coming from overseas on election days, at Mars opposite Pluto. And then December 6th, now we're in the Mars retrograde. Oh, this was so interesting how literal this was. So Mars stationed at 6 Leo on the north node of the United States in the 8th house. And Deborah Holding has written a book called The Houses. And one of these things she says about the 8th house with this type of configuration is natural disasters and problems from wars. So we had an Mars stationed retrograde, and then the next day Neptune stationed direct, and there was an earthquake in California that triggered a tsunami warning. So it was like to the day. That was so interesting. And the healthcare assassination attempt, one of the things that motivated Luigi Mangione, which I feel like is a very much Mars and Leo story. And I wrote and I talked about at the Ingress talk that there may be a Leo type person who gets attention because like Leo has imagery of the one. And look at, I mean, I feel like Luigi is this Perseus type character who has brought to the attention the horrors of the healthcare industry that has brought it back into the collective with the new moon in Sagittarius squaring Saturn and Pisces, well, talking all about this. And yeah, Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius, he escaped on this bicycle, and he has become this iconic Mars and Leo figure that's really is a Pluto and Aquarius story as well. Like, I think a big story about Mars and Mercury retrograde has been the fury of the populace around the healthcare system has come rising up to the surface, and about how angry people are about the disparity, the class disparity and the wealth disparity in the country. And something I wrote on Threads and Instagram, I think he may have single-handedly saved the Obamacare or from being repealed and not replaced, which had been one of my predictions for next fall. But I think he may have stopped that now that if that was being considered by him bringing to the conscious attention of the public, the fury around how horrible the US healthcare system is. So are there any questions, or do Shu or Stevie or anyone have any comments?
There's a question on the calendar year, that Aries ingress. Does it always start on March 19th of the current year?
It starts when the sun ingresses into Aries, which is around March 19th every year. But when the sun gets to 0 Aries. And it's the cardinal, it's a world point. So it's all of the 0 degrees of the cardinal signs. And I'm going to be doing a talk next year for a webinar about the world point. So stay tuned for that.
Yes, it'll be a free webinar. So that'll be really interesting. Callum, did you get your screen back, or do you want me to keep going with the questions?
Yeah, I'm having so many technical issues here. Can everyone see the screens okay? The slides, by the way? Because
Yes.
I'm pretty much dark. Okay, I can only see the regular chat. I can't see the Q&A, so I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem. Xenia would like to know how you correlate riding on a broom as a Virgo theme.
Well, Virgo is I call that the chop wood, carry water side. It's about the mundane tasks that we do to make life stay in order. One of them is sweeping to clean, that cleanliness kind of thing. So I feel like the broom is Virgo energy.
Thank you.
And be able to create magic is the Pisces energy.
Oh, yeah.
And oh my God, like Elphaba is such a Aquarian figure that Mars in Aquarius, she got mad and then like a hurricane started forming around her.
Next question is if you think what about the canceling of the Taylor Swift concert due to the bomb threat? I think that relates back to what you were talking about.
Absolutely, that Mars in Aquarius, like one of the most popular people in the country, beloved by many. Mars conjunct the moon, like trying to take her out, and it happened overseas in ninth house, and that brings in the theme of the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction as well. An attack. Uranus on Jupiter, the celebrity, plus the Venus Saturn, like trying to take out a really popular singer.
Yeah. Okay. I think the other questions are great for the panel after we get through the slides. So don't worry, we'll get to your questions, or I don't know that we'll get to all of them, but the ones we have now, we should get to. And yes, you will get a replay of the recording, and I don't know yet about the slides because I did not ask in advance. So we will find out and let you know on the slides. So I think we're ready to move on to the next slide, Callum.
Yeah, and another thing I should have said, like a big topic of the year was the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, and we saw that in so many ways, like so many elections. Uranus rules elections, and it rules abortion. And the Algol theme I wrote down because Uranus is on Algol, and the beheading star. And I wrote down the Trump assassination attempt. We had, what's his name? J.D. Vance, who kept talking about childless cat ladies. One of the symbologies of Algol is Lilith imagery about women who will not be subservient kind of thing. So we saw that. At the Olympics in France, they had the Marie Antoinette thing where she was holding the head underneath her shoulder. That brought to the attention that Algol, the Medusa imagery with the head of snakes. Yeah, and then I talked about Luigi. So for next year, so we're just talking about the very beginning of the year, how we're entering into 2025. And one of the biggest themes is the North Node will go into Pisces and the South Node will go into Virgo, changing the work that we're doing. And right now, the North Node is getting closer and closer to 0 degrees of Aries, which that world point, it's that beginning initiating energy, and the nodes move backwards. So it's going to feel kind of destabilizing to have the North Node go back to 29 degrees of Pisces. So we'll see what happens with that. You see, it's conjunct Neptune. There's so much like confusion. I feel like what we're seeing with these drones all over the place feels very much around that Pisces energy. So there will be the amplification of Neptunian themes next year, and the nodes staying assigned for a year and a half about faith, conspiracies, confusion, more and more escapism. Although a lot of people are quitting intoxicants with Saturn and Neptune coming together. I feel like we have this Gemini moon square the nodes. Question everything, believe nothing is such a big theme that's coming up, and we see it already now. Like so many people were shocked by the election results, myself included. I was predicting a Kamala win. Yeah. Rampant misinformation, deep fakes with Jupiter and Gemini square Saturn and Pisces will continue. We've been seeing them already. We had, and it'll be interesting to see what comes out with the Capricorn sun. The sun rules the leader. Capricorn, governments, big business on a world point and trine Uranus. I think that speaks to continued discussion around. I think one of my predictions is Luigi is going to, his trial will happen when Saturn and Neptune are both in Aries. The mythologized person who's an anti-hero. I mean, he murdered someone, but is seen as a man of the people because his actions have brought to the attention of people, how awful, it's brought to the conversation how awful healthcare is. And with Uranus going into Gemini, it's spurring, like, I feel like that the healthcare CEO being murdered may be the Pluto in Aquarius, the revolution that started about, singular people fighting against the elites kind of thing. So we'll see if there's more news around topics around leaders, big business, right around on January 11th. But we see the 11th house. We see Algol there. 26 Taurus is Algol. Is there going to be some kind of beheading around congressional things? Nancy Pelosi fell down some stairs in Europe. Hopefully she's going to be fine. And yeah, we see the ascendant is where the moon was in the Aries ingress. So the people, yeah, there's a lot about the people. What is that going to mean? The people are Leo. The people are they confident? Are they fiery? Are they dealing with fire? Yeah, we'll see how this shows up. So that's all I had to say about the North Node entering Pisces. I think there's going to be lots and lots of storms next year. So, recommendations, like if you're moving, do not move, like really think about it. Think about weatherproofing where you live now, or if you're selecting a place to live, like a basement apartment may not be the best choice kind of thing. Think about what if there's a big unexpected storm like what happened in North Carolina. They had no reason to think they would be having in Asheville, having this kind of hurricane causes devastation. We are in a place where, think about fire. Neptune and Saturn are going into Aries. Is this a place where fire could be a problem? Double checking, the electrical wherever you're moving, if you're moving. These are some things to be thinking about in preparation of these changing energies. But I think Uranus and Gemini, everyone's a revolutionary, could be something that we're seeing. Or lots of people are revolutionaries. The young people are revolutionaries. And I got to download The Eyes Have It. So what's Uranus and Gemini going to bring? Some kind of thing in our eyes, or Saturn, Neptune, some kind of problem with health problem that has to relate to eyes. Yeah, health issues will be coming up with the South Node in Virgo. Land. That's it for me, Callum.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Celeste. I can only see the regular chat, but I actually wanted to put a question really to you and the panel. And as I went back over your Aries Ingress webinar, you actually did predict an old man would be in office as the president. So my question is, and this is for me, because I got the election prediction wrong as well, and I spoke to the brilliant Sam Reynolds, and his point was that maybe looking at individual candidate charts isn't effective, and the mundane astrology is, because it subsumes the individual. And I think that's really changed my whole perspective on looking at elections and not doing individual candidate charts. Now, that's a question for you, Celeste, and maybe for everybody on the panel as well.
What is the question? I'm sorry.
Just whether maybe astrologers should be looking at the mundane astrology, like the Aries Ingress for Washington, D.C. for elections, rather than looking at the individual candidates. I think that's just an interest, and it's something that Sam Reynolds brought up, which I thought was.
Oh, yeah.
Wondered your thoughts.
Absolutely. And I was looking at the mundane too, but one of the big mistakes I made was the election actually happened at Mars at 29 degrees of, excuse me, Pluto at 29 degrees of Capricorn. And I thought there would be more of that Pluto in Aquarius because we got a taste of it and we were ready to leave behind that bloated, fat, greedy, destroying the drill baby drill energy behind, but apparently we're not. But you can see how, like really that late stage capitalism, like really taking it to the max, balls to the wall, is going to lead to the revolution of people, yeah, people fighting back against it.
That was wonderful, Celeste. Thank you. Yeah, I agree with what you and Sam talked about too. Yeah. And to tack on with Celeste, just the late stage capitalism of it all. And I thought we got our taste of Pluto and Aquarius too, but it's interesting that we have the mundane situation. We have we'll circle back into this, but I really liked what you were saying about Mars as well, as the Lord of the year for the Ingress chart last year.
So, what I'm going to introduce or share with you today is a slightly different tact. I want to take you back to more ancient times, the times of ancient archaeoastronomy where we saw big stone structures erected, pre-Christianity times, where people gathered around the rising of the sun and the setting of the suns and lived outside and lived within their environment. And one of the things that they tracked was this idea of the lunar standstill. And they tracked many things, but the lunar standstill is something that we've only just quite recently discovered that was actually being recorded by the ancient peoples. But we've only discovered that since, I think, around the 1970s. However, it's been done for a very long time, and it's it's seen with rock formations and stone structures, such as Stonehenge. So what it is essentially, it is like if you consider that the sun has a solstice point where it reaches the greatest declination in the north or the south, depending on which hemisphere of the world that you live in and which season it is. The same thing also happens with the moon, except rather than happening every year with the sun, the lunar standstill or the lunarstice, which is the alternative name, happens every 18.6 years. And so that's really special. And you may have noticed that in the past year, the moon has kind of looked a bit odd. If you do look at skies regularly, you may have noticed that the moon is rising or setting at really weird places on the horizon. And that's because it's been building up to this peak declination over the last year and a half or so. And it's having its peak in January 2025. So this is such a wonderful thing to be sharing with you all today, because we are at this lunar standstill peak. And it's not a once-off event. Like, it will be kind of peaking at the start of 2025, and it will still be massively out of bounds for the next year or so, but it will start to go back and head back towards the pathway of the sun. And so what happens is that every 18.6 years, we will see the moon rise and set either at around 28.73 maximum northern declination or southern declination. And then it will sort of come back eventually to be within the 23.45 degrees. So that's actually what's happening right now. If we can move on to the next slide, Callum. So these are just some visual images that I grabbed off online. I guess one of the really special ones is the Callanish standing stones in Scotland, where there was a woman, and I can't remember her name now, and she really, that was her life's work, where she followed this moon and discovered that as the moon was making her standstill maximum major northern declination, it would rise up above these pillars of stones that represented this woman lying on her side, and it would actually descend down across the tops of these stones. So it was really special, and ceremonies would be held around this time, and it was a very significant moment because, you know, unlike the summer solstice or the winter solstice, this only happens every 18.6 years. So Stonehenge also recorded this. I would imagine this picture here, I know it's of the sun, but it's probably marking out the equinox sun, and when the sun maybe sets behind those, you know, outer pillars, it may be, I don't know, lunar standstill points, perhaps. I'm not quite sure, but I thought that was a nice little picture. And if anyone lives around Colorado, there is Chimney Rock that you can actually go and visit. It's quite a popular thing now. So I encourage you all, if you can get there, to go and see the moon rising and setting between these two pillars, these stone formations, at every 19 years. Okay. And so let's move on to the next slide, Callum. So this is a chart that's pulled out of the Solar Fire program, and it's just a graphic ephemeris of the major and minor lunar standstills for, I think, about a 50-year period. So you'll see that we're currently in this middle column here, where the declination of the moon, which is the distance from the equator, rises or, you know, dips right to the northern or maximum levels of 28 point, about 28.5 degrees. And then that happens every 18.6 years. But in between, there's also a declination that it goes to about 18 degrees or so, 18.5 degrees, where the moon will stay within the bounds of the sun. And that happens every 9.5 years prior to a major lunar standstill. So I've got my slides wrong there. It should say major lunar standstill on the long line. Apologies for that. So basically you have a minor lunar standstill every 9.5 years, and to a major lunar standstill every 9.5 years. But between the major and the major and the minor and the minor, it would be 18.6 years. Sorry about that. It can be a bit confusing. And so what we're seeing is that every time it peaks, the major ones are the probably more important ones because they're more like special, I guess. It's about a 3-year cycle that it peaks. So the first year we see the increasing of a distance. The second year we're seeing the moon peak, and then the third year the moon will diminish. And so 2025 is the actual peak year. So that's super special. And so what we can imagine, the astrological considerations of this peak moon, this peak out of bounds moon, is that the world is going to be geopolitically a bit wild and erratic. You know, an out of bounds planet is what they call a maverick planet, a planet that doesn't behave, that acts outside of the normal parameters of society. It can show very extreme behaviors in people if you were born with these out of bound moons, or maybe peak emotional reactions that come up during these times. And what I find as well with these peak moon declinations is that it can get us to really tap into our own cycles and our own bodies and give it more priority and preferences, because it's kind of saying, you know, I'm not going to put up with, you know, what I have been doing for a long time. I'm going to put myself first, or put my body first. And because the moon rules the body and the cyclic systems, for women, it's the menstrual systems, but it can also be our circulatory systems, our circadian rhythms. All of those things can feel a bit out of whack, which may make you prioritize those issues for yourself. And so this is happening in this kind of broader 3-year period. Geopolitically, it can show times of great change and instability, things happening that we're not really used to. So if we're looking at the last major lunar standstill, that was just before the global financial crisis. So that kind of gives you an indication of the times that we're kind of in right now. And when I was speaking to my Taoist master, he was saying that the major lunar standstill is the peak yin energy. So what that is this inward retractive quality where we may be pulled towards stillness and pulled towards darkness. So if you've been feeling a little bit, maybe feeling a bit complacent or not having much energy, maybe, it's probably this Mars retrograde, but it could also be the fact that it's coinciding with this yin energy of the major lunar standstill. We are being called to sit still and to do nothing, and to tap out a little bit and to go within. The other thing that the out of bounds moon will affect, especially at these major declination levels, is the tides. And so what we'll be seeing is that the tidal bulge that's influenced by the moon will be shifting further northwards or further southwards. So countries at the latitudes of 28.5 degrees north and south will be experiencing much higher tides than usual. And so if you do live at those latitudes, you may have noticed that there could have been, greater oceanic activity. And I would be watching for, say, when Neptune and Saturn move into Aries next year to see what happens there. The moon will still be very out of bounds. They're hitting those greater latitudes that normally doesn't affect, the moon doesn't usually affect at those latitudes when it's within the bounds of the sun.
Actually, a quick question, Shu. I can only see the
Sure.
general chat. What do we mean by when we're talking about out of bounds planets?
Oh, okay. So the out of bounds planets is when it moves outside of 23.5 degrees north or south, because the sun's path dictates the normal quality of planets behaving within the normal parameters. That's the declination of the sun at between winter solstice and summer solstice. So as long as planets are within that 23.5 degrees, they can be considered to be, I guess, within their normal range. When planets go outside of that 23.5 degrees, they're considered to be out of bounds. And that's when they can show these kind of weird behaviors or out of character behaviors of these planets. And every planet, most planets go out of bounds from certain times. And currently, what's special about this moment is that the moon is moving right to its maximum point, which only happens every 19 or so years. So apologies, I've made a great assumption that everyone knew what out of bounds is. So thanks for that reminder.
And thank you for
Okay.
I asked the question in the chat, how many people here have got out of bounds planets? And there was so many moons coming through, and I was like, wow. I wonder on average whether a lot of astrologers have out of bounds planets. Just being a little bit out there. I don't know.
Yes, I've heard you mention that before. I mean, well, personally, I don't. So, but I'm sure there are a lot of people that are, considered the stereotypical weirdos, that are out of bounds. But it's not only what's happening natally, but we also experience out of bound planets, say, as we go through our secondary progressions. And everyone at the moment is experiencing this collectively because it is a transit. And so let me go to the next slide and I can get more into the astrological details as to when these out of bounds planets actually happen. So the dates here, every 19 years from 2024 to 2026. But this might illustrate this more clearly for you. There is a very strong relationships with the lunar nodes and the moon, as you would imagine. So when the moon is at its peak standstill, at the peak out of bounds, moment, it can only happen in the solstice signs of Capricorn or Cancer, or the signs before. So pretty much at the cusp of the 0 degrees Capricorn or 0 degrees Cancer, you will have Sagittarius on one side of Capricorn and Gemini on the other side of Cancer. So if you've got a moon, a natal moon around the late degrees of Gemini, Sag, or the early degrees of Capricorn, Cancer, and you also had the North Node in Aries, you would be at a peak natal lunar chart. Okay, so the peak of the lunar standstills only happen when the North Node moves into 0 degrees Aries. Okay, so that's January the 11th. So that is in technical terms, the peak of the moon, which is super special. Like, we are coming up to this really amazing time. And I'm actually going to be celebrating this on my property by marking and observing with a group of people the point of the rise and sets. So it's going to be a camp out kind of event. And we will be marking it with a sculpture where the moon rises through. So technically we can come back in another 18.5 years to have that same ceremony, and we will see the moon rise and set through that same sculpture that we will be erecting. So, you know, this is, you've got time to prepare if you want to do something like this with a group of friends, to create some kind of a ceremonial event. The best, I will talk about the best times to do it later, but, you know, this is the time to start looking for a good horizon line, for one. I've been looking for a good horizon line for the last couple of years, and I have stakes all over my property, but it turns out that the best place was literally right outside my back door. So sometimes, you know, it is, you know, at the places that you least expect, but what you want is a nice open horizon line where you can see, you know, planets rising or setting, essentially. Okay, so let's see. When the North Node is at 0 degrees of Libra, that's when we have one of those minor lunar standstill peaks where it's within the bounds of the sun at 18.5 degrees. But yeah, the special one is when the North Node is at 0 degrees Aries. That's when the moon is going to be at the major maximum standstill moment. So given this, we can say that the lunar standstill never occurs at times of eclipses, okay? It only occurs at the bendings. So as astrologers, this can hopefully give you some interpretive principles around possibly some of the meaning and occurrences of the major lunar standstill. So if we think about it, 0 degree Aries, that's the activation of a cardinal world point. So it's a structure that connects us to the larger world. You know, when we look at like the Aries Ingress chart, as Celeste has presented, this is a chart that actually connects us to the whole world. Like Callum mentioned, you know, a thought that, you know, the mundane Aries Ingress chart is more likely to be a chart that describes more accurately, say, world leaders' lives as opposed to their natal charts, because that 0 degrees Aries is, I guess, the portal to the above, to the greater collective field that envelops us. And so have a think about that, and the lunar standstill occurring when the North Node hits the 0 degrees of Aries, that this is a time that we are actually tapping out of our lives and into some kind of greater collective, whether that collective is geopolitical or whether it's greater still, like, you know, towards more cosmic levels. And as we are speaking today, the moon, because it's reaching such high latitudes right now, it's actually occulting the Pleiades, which it usually can't do because the Pleiades is outside of the bounds of the sun. So we're actually in a very special time right now, and having that moon occult it, not just reaching it by longitude, but reaching it by latitude as well, we are actually getting access to greater transmissions that we don't usually have. So I would make use of this time to really just sit still, sit within that yin energy, just to receive what the world is trying to tell you. It's almost as if these lunar opportunities come up because it's forcing a message upon us, and so we must, I feel we must ceremonialize it, or at least sit within a quiet space to tap into that energy. And so when it occurs at the bendings as well, these lunar points occurring when it's at 90 degrees of the nodes. Well, what does this mean? Well, the bendings to me, and I'd be interested to see, what the panelists think as well. For me, this is the furthest point away from the nodes, which to me are the karmic default points of reactions that we have as human beings. Like, we can't help but be our lunar nodes. It's almost like a forced, fated set of characteristics and circumstances that we are pulled towards the world in our life to manifest. But when the moon's so far away from these karmic points, it gives us such a great consciousness to act on our own accord. We're separated from the karmic pulls, whether that's generational issues and traumas, to future ambitions and the consumption and aspirations that we have to want to manifest. But at this still 90-degree point, we can look at both forwards and backwards and make very conscious choices about our lives. And so if you have any planets at the bendings, those are the planets that act very consciously. You call the shots. You're creating a future. You're breaking tradition. You're breaking generational trauma. So this is that time that the moon will allow you to do this at this amazing, occultation of the Pleiades at the peak that happens every 19 years. So this is just so special. So I'm just interested to hear, what your other thoughts are on the bendings, if you have them. Callum, did you?
Sorry, Shu, just a quick question. I don't know what's going on with the presentations today, but at the bottom of the slide, what are the dates? If there's dates in there, can you see it on your end?
It doesn't say dates, but it just says the minor lunar standstill peaks at when the North Node is at 0 degrees Aries. So it essentially says what's at the top of the slide there, that the major lunar standstill peaks when the North Node is at 0 degrees Aries. So it's just the opposite of that, 0 degrees Libra. So very, very special moment. And, the symbology of the standstill with that North Node Aries energy, we can see this kind of clash between the feminine of the moon with the very masculine themes of the Aries energy. Aries brings in that leadership, independence, autonomy, maybe themes of wars and battles and actions, military and strife. It could be sports or competitive sports. And I think personally, it's about our quests that are being stimulated at these major standstills that are being enacted here at a very conscious level. So it's almost like a time that I'm thinking that we're setting ourselves a goal, a very big goal, and that goal is almost like a 19-year goal with a midway, 9.5 years midway point there of reconsideration. So, this is a moment where if you're feeling that life is, I guess, at a bit of a, turning point for you, that's probably because of this lunar standstill. I mean, there's lots of other transits that are happening to also back this up, but coming back to this very ancient structure, I can imagine, ancient peoples coming together to witness this together every 19 years and consider where the community is heading towards, where the tribe is moving towards together collectively, you know. And I mean, that's just what I'm envisaging, but we can all recreate that for ourselves in some very special way. And the fact that, you know, if we're wanting to combine cardinal points, North Node in Aries, out of bounds moons at the bendings, what I could probably say is that this can lead to very volatile action, but with very purposeful intent, initiation of personal missions, and the conscious uprising of inner wild natures. So I guess they're my three, you know, for want of a better word, predictions as to what might be happening psychologically for everyone. So when is the best times to view this? My slides are over, so we can probably just go back towards the panelist view, Callum, so you can see us and hopefully, and we. But the best times to view this, obviously, it's when you have an open horizon line and when the moon is closest to 0 degrees Cancer and closest to 0 degrees Capricorn, or either sides of them. So check your ephemeris whenever you see for the next 18 months or 12 to 18 months, whenever the moon is close to 0 degrees Cancer or Capricorn, you know it's going to be out of bounds. Okay. And if you want to go and actually see this, obviously you will need to have the moon close to its fullness. So it has to be somewhere between the first quarter moon and the third quarter moon. The full moon is obviously the best times because you get the most special energies there. And another, you know, Captain Obvious statement is that we need to have a clear sky, free of clouds. And yeah, I've already mentioned the open horizon. So when we take all these factors into consideration, it does really narrow it down to only a handful of times. And what I'm glad to say is that you'll be able to view this tonight. Well, for me, it's tonight, and tonight, I think for you as well. This is the opportunity to view it because we are in that Sagittarius Capricorn season in December, January. So the moon's going to be, when it's traveling through here, it's going to be hitting these maximum points. So what you want to do is head out there tonight, and this will be a practice run if you want to do the major peak run in January. Okay. And so head out there tonight. My kids and I are actually going to be sleeping outside under the stars tonight. Also because it's going to be 40 degrees. So we thought it was a great time to be able to view it. And just as you would have it at the site that we're about to sleep, which is literally right outside my back door, we nearly stepped on a snake there that slid right across the front door. So for me, I saw that as an omen of the lunar standstill speaking to us. The nodes were coming to greet us already, and so we will be sleeping out there tonight. But the major event will be in January, around the 12th and 13th for Australians. It could be the 11th and 12th for Northern Hemisphere people. Because that's going to be closest to when the North Node is hitting 0 degrees of Aries. So you want to use the time tonight to actually scout a good location. If you're near Colorado, you know, you've got it easy. You can just go to Chimney Rock. There's also a place in Ohio that has an ancient Native American mound structures that has also tracked these lunar standstills. So just check it out, because the Native Americans were really into this, and I think there's a few sites across America that are natural, for either natural formations or formations made by man or women in the past that have observed this phenomenon. So there will be a handful of times during the 2025 year as well, mainly, you know, January. There's also some moments at the end of the year, but without taking up too much time, I've actually created a bit of a guide and ephemeris and highlighted the best times for viewing on my website, and there's a link there if you wanted to just download it and just put it up on your wall, because you don't want to miss this, because it will be another 19 years before you will be able to witness this kind of phenomena. So I think that's all for me for the moment. Sorry about the shaky start. I kind of always assume people know things like out of bounds and the meanings of it. But if you have any questions, I'm also happy to take it. And I'm also excited to see what everyone, if anyone does follow this. There are people that I know that have tracked the last 3 lunar standstills. You know, they are our wise elders who we need to turn to right now, to get these transmissions. Oh, and the other thing I will add as well, currently the moon, as I said before, is occulting the Pleiades, but in the January lunar standstill, the moon will be occulting El Nath, which is the in the constellation of Taurus. It's another fixed star. So fixed stars is something that you work with. This is not going to be a common occultation. It's only able to occult that El Nath fixed star because of the distance that the moon is making from the sun and the equator right now. So if you do work with that fixed star, it is a very special time to be sitting and receiving those transmissions.
Wonderful, Shu. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing all this information. I didn't want to take the slides off because I feared I'd never get them back, but
All right.
we do have Stevie come up. Laurie, I can't see the Q&A, so I don't know if there's any questions specific to Shu.
So there are a few about the lunar standstill. And let's see. The first question is that I thought I heard Shu say that the lunar standstill peak is yin energy, and why wouldn't it be yang energy?
Well, that's a perspective from one of my teachers, who's a Taoist, who is in the Taoist tradition. He views the lunar standstill as a yin energy. So what he would do is do all of his, if he was to ceremonialize it, he would be doing meditations and his qigong practices that are more the yin forms. So the moon is one of the feminine planets, like one of the 2 feminine planets, if we're looking at those kinds of temperaments. And it's the natural significator for women and mothers and carers. And so I guess that's why it's the peak yin energy. But I think there's a mix of both, because the North Node is in Aries as well. So to me, this is like the nodes being something bigger than us. We're in this kind of yang active environment, but I think what we're called to do is to be still and to do nothing. As what my master would say, is to practice Wu Wei, which is the act of just allowing matters to unfold rather than to interact and intervene and to meddle with the fate of events.
Okay. And Jean is asking if you could talk a little more about the minor lunar node peaks, like when they are, some more clarification on when they are.
Okay. So the minor peaks, they're not as significant because we don't see them visually as anything more significant, but they are every 9.5 years on either side of the major lunar standstill peak. So the last minor lunar standstill peak was between 2014 to 2016. And the next one will be in 2033 to 2036. And so I guess that would, I would assume that would be, the moon sort of acting within the bounds of the sun, and so being more, I guess, normal, in quotation marks. And so also they're a little less uneventful, if you would say. But what we can see is there's a turning around that happens. There's a ramping up of that moon energy that's kind of building a resistance to say, I want to have more autonomy. I want to now raise myself up to that level of that peak and to put my priorities front and center. Yep.
Okay. Peter has a kind of a comment question. Interesting that the moon in Capricorn is most likely to be out of bounds, and it coincides with, well, the moon is detriment in Capricorn. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I think when in these archaic times, I'm not sure that essential dignity was a huge thing for these peoples. I think it was more about the observations of the stars. And yes, we can bring into like the concepts of essential dignity into this, and that it's not always a negative thing as well, like planets in detriment. It's like things happening outside of us, alternatives, things happening in foreign places. So I feel like the lunar standstill moment is a layer above all of the other interpretive factors that are used to kind of delineate sublunary matters, matters of the material world. So this is kind of a greater layer of a filter that can be for it to be watched through. But interesting that you say that also, Peter, because the other significant point in the January lunar standstill, which I didn't mention, is that the moon and Mars will also be occulting at the same time. So the Mars is also out of bounds between January and April, so pretty much the first quarter of 2025. So we'll have both moon and Mars out of bounds, outside of the path of the sun. And just after the peak of the lunar standstill, I think around the 14th of January, the moon and Mars will be making an occultation, which means they'll be in the exact same spot in the sky, kind of like an eclipse of the moon and Mars. So that's going to be a really spicy time. It's going to be extremely wild. And, partly my advice is to be still and do nothing. Don't be jumping out of planes or, going on massive adventures. The adventures kind of happen within on your own personal quest.
I am just going to talk a little bit about the Mars story. We're bringing it with us into 2025, so it's a bit of a crossover moment. So let's see what the story is. Basically, this is sort of somewhat of a survival guide as well. So we have the Synodic cycle, which is just the relationship of a planet, a celestial body, to the sun or earth. And the cycle maps out when that body returns to an identical position. So in this circumstance, we're looking at the conjunction. And so this synodic cycle started 2023, and we close it out in 2026. It's about a 2-year period. And we're kind of right in the middle now. So in this middle point, we get the retrograde moment. And at that moment, we have Mars being at its minimum distance from Earth. So if you're a stargazer, this occultation is also going to be really special because, yep, Mars is at its closest point to Earth. So Mars is meeting up with the moon in declination and zodiacal position. So that'll be a beautiful spectacle to behold. So this is just sort of the astronomical movements. We can go to the next slide to do kind of an astrological assessment. So basically, I just kind of took all of the aspects that Mars is going to be giving and receiving through this initial retrograde journey. We have, I know that you all are going to talk about a lot of this in January's episode, so come back for that. They'll probably give it a lot more detail than what we're giving it here because we have other months to go through as well. But we have kind of the whole cast is here. We have aspects to Pluto, we have an ingress into Cancer, we have aspects to Neptune, the sun opposing Mars on the 15th, and that's going to be around that time where we have the maximum closeness to Earth. So if you're stargazing, look for Mars around the 15th. It'll be the brightest. We have the sextile to Uranus. There's a couple of Mercury aspects. So basically this retrograde story, we're going from Leo to Cancer. So I think Celeste did a great job bringing up the CEO, and Luigi. Obviously, Leo is correlated with CEOs, kings, rulers, people in dominant positions or powerful positions, um, fireplaces, chimneys. So all this sort of excessive heat that Mars already emanates is going to be exacerbated. But when we have the retrograde motion, I sort of like to think about it with a couple of mythological stories. We have Aries being trapped in the bronze jar by the giants, and we have Aries being caught up in Hephaestus's golden net. So there's a couple of mythological stories where Mars is bound and Mars is throwing a big fit. So Mars is, this bravery. People, we have associations with fearlessness with Mars, but there's also a level of, well, you don't always win. Mars isn't about just valor and victory. It's about like losing too, and trying your best and losing and sort of getting back up. And even when Mars is in these places of imprisonment mythologically, he's advocating for his release the entire time, and he's trying to get out, and he's calling on Hermes to do this, and so the valor, the energy never kind of stops, even when we're in these retrograde motions. But I think when we hit the retrograde, these stories serve a really good purpose because it just kind of shows us how much energy we can overextend on trying to survive, as opposed to taking stock of an inventory of where we are. Are we trapped in a bronze jar? Who do we need to talk to get out of this jar? What god do we call in a favor to get out of this jar? So Mars is gonna oppose Pluto. We see that with really intense power struggles, frustrations. We have the retrograde into Cancer, and in that case, we're changing in temperament here. So I think the gut feelings might be something to pay more attention to. I think the internalizing, and with the lunar standstill, this is exactly hand in glove, especially with their occultation. Going in, internalizing, those are great tips for the ingress into Cancer. And then, with Cancer, we have balms, bellies, brooks, cisterns, so issues with water, if phlegmatic, humors and temperament, issues with the sea. I think Celeste talked about that as well. And Shu did, mentioning the surges with the tides. So I think Mars being in this Cancer is going to exacerbate some of that as well. We have the opposition. So that is, this kind of very Capricornian moment of the sun being opposed to Mars at their maximum distance from one another. So it can really feel like a time where we might not know the next direction. And that's, again, what these retrogrades serve a lot of times, is going back over things that were left undone, or reevaluating how we want to put our energy forward. We have Mars sextile Uranus. I think, again, with Celeste brought up the Mars conjunct Uranus with the presidential attempt. So the sextile is a more creative energy, of course, than the conjunction, but at the same time, we could see this again people wanting to take things into their own hands, unique adjustments or amendments, things around that conjunction might kind of pop back up, but we might be able to reassess those time periods. So that would be, I think, over the summer when Trump was the assassination attempt. So shortly after that, we have Mercury opposing Mars. So that's giving some details. Again, mythologically speaking, Hermes has been an ally to Mars. So that could be important details coming to light and concrete ways to adjust things. We have Venus trine Mars, which is a moment of grace. I think it's definitely a balm. We're going to have Venus exalted trine Mars, so that's going to be a moment of reprieve. So then we have some February aspects, Mars retro trine Saturn, more solitude, stillness, slowing. Again, Mars being in Cancer at this time, really internalizing. Then we have our second Hermes aspect, Mercury, Pisces, trine Mars. So more details emerge, but this time it's not concrete details. I think part of what Mars, the arc of going from Leo to Cancer, is really to get our actions in line with our feelings and emotions. And so this second Mercury aspect is now going to be a trine, but from Pisces. So yeah, there's absolutely a level of letting go of what you have to do to change things and kind of more of that acceptance, especially over a lot of the times if we try and do something just to fix the external reality, we're missing a really big lesson on the internal. And this is how these retrogrades kind of make us go back over ground, back and forth. We have our station direct moment in February, and we're off to the races. So I think it's a long and drawn out process. We won't actually be out of the shadows until May 2nd, but with all of these different aspects to Mars, I think by May 2nd, we're gonna have a lot more, I think a lot more. I think that Luigi Mangione situation is definitely going to come back up. We're going to have a lot more issues with where do we productively put our energy in order to head off with these CEOs, with people in power. I think Celeste also brought up natural disasters. How do we pull together to face great conflict? So a lot of this Mars story is basically getting right with yourself so that you can be in community with somebody else. Getting right with yourself so that you have a palatable change that you can actually make in the material world. So yeah, that's just a little quick survival guide. We can go to the next slide. We have do's and don'ts. So do stretch before you exercise. Be more careful in the kitchen. Do spend time introspecting on anger management. Do pay attention to reckless drivers and speeding. Do choose your battles wisely. Be aware of excessive dryness. We don't want to get tattooed during this time. Maybe if you're getting something covered up or getting something reworked, it could work if you want to get a tattoo under that, or re-getting your ears pierced or something. But I think a lot of the don'ts are just calming, taking a step back. Don't forget to turn your stoves off. Obviously, Mars is excessive heat and dryness. So we just want to be aware of every way that we can kind of push our limits, and try not to push our limits as much as possible. Obviously, don't start an affair with Venus during this time, or you might end up in a net. Think just basic things like that. So we can go to the next slide. That's basically my little Mars survival guide. And here's an election. This is January 3rd. It's Friday. So wherever you are, you want this to ideally be about the first 10 degrees of Taurus rising. We have the moon waxing. The moon is fast. It's obviously conjoined with Venus. Venus is aspecting the first house from a position of exaltation. We have a beautiful moon, sun in its house of joy. So if you can't get this at this time, and this is Pacific Standard Time, what you want to do is try for the hour of Venus or hour of Sun, because they're going to be back to back. So I think either one of those would work if you in your location need to fudge with that a little bit. So the hour of Venus, day of Venus, exalted Venus, 11th house. We have joining a club or co-op or meetup, organizing a meetup, doing glamour shots, or getting kind of a makeover or glow up. If you've been wanting to invest in a new wardrobe or do anything kind of really nice for yourself, this is a great time to treat yourself. It's not great for one-on-one interactions. As we can see, the retrograde Mars is the Lord of the seventh, but it is good for group meetings, alliances, unionizing, fundraising, and things like that. We have Jupiter in the second house. So kind of a fortunate moment to even fundraise, if you will, or something like an art market or selling some kind of specialty. So, yep, that's what I got for us. And sorry, I kind of blew through mine really quick. I know we've been here for a minute, and I have a fast, I have a Mercury Aries, so I talk like that.
Wonderful, Stevie. That's our survival guide coming up. I absolutely love it. And the election's brilliant. Fantastic. Do we have any questions in the Q&A?
I wanted to say that Angel said they accidentally set fire to a glass measuring cup in the microwave. So Stevie's note about being really careful with knives, fire in the kitchen is very on point.
Stevie, when can I get more tattoos? Because I'm planning next year. When do I have to wait? How long do I have to wait?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, ideally, the next synodic cycle starts with the conjunction of the Mars in Capricorn. So exalted Mars might be a nice time. That won't be for a year though. So let's just get ourselves, maybe when Mars goes to Scorpio, that'd be great. Yeah.
And I like what you said, Stevie, about thank you for pointing out the Mars-Sun opposition. That's happening on the 15th, like you said, very close to that peak lunar standstill that's occulting Mars. And what I find fascinating about that is when Mars makes that opposition as a retrograde to the Sun, there's a real change in power dynamics there, because all of a sudden the Mars is actually moving into the evening star phase, and Sun is now overcoming Mars, in its future transits, as opposed to Mars overcoming the Sun. So there's this kind of handing over of power and this turning point in that Mars journey as well that coincides with that lunar standstill. So thanks for pointing that out.
That's a great point. Thank you.
It's a very Marsy year, start of the year.
I'm really excited to hear about each of your takes on Pluto, now solidly in Aquarius for the next 20 years. Do you think Syria and social media reactions to health insurance CEO assassination is telling about the dark side of Pluto in Aquarius? Is there a direct link?
Absolutely. So, and also what's going on in New Zealand. So it happened right around the full moon in Taurus, days before Pluto went into Aquarius, where the haka dance was done on the floor of their parliament. And the day Pluto went into Aquarius, we saw over 40,000 of the Maori people and supporters marching in New Zealand. So I thought that was very much Pluto and Aquarius, power to the people. Luigi, the reaction to Luigi killing the CEO, where there wanted posters being put up in New York for other CEOs, and people, the McDonald's where they turned him in, the snitches, even Burger King got in on it and said, they did a Twitter post that said, "We don't snitch," after as a marketing thing. And they got a bunch of 1-star reviews. That's definitely the shadow side of Pluto in the Aquarius, with Mars retrograde in Leo, Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius. The people are out for blood. Definitely. And Syria, I don't know if it's shadow, but I mean, Assad was a horrendous dictator, being overthrown and seeing the people coming out of the prisons with a new moon square Saturn and Pisces. Yeah, seeing all these people being freed from this torment. I feel like that's, we'll see what happens, what kind of government they set up, but there could be an opportunity for there to be a more democratic Syria. We'll see. I mean, I don't know. But there's an opportunity here, bringing back the themes of the Arab Spring for some newness.
Well, I just wanted to add to the New Zealand Haka event. For me, I've been watching this Pluto in Aquarius and its connection to the whole colonization story. So when Pluto first went into Aquarius in 2023, to that day, Australia announced that it was going to run a referendum on the yes/no voting to include the Indigenous voices into Parliament. So that literally happened the day that Pluto went into Aquarius. So I thought that's striking. So I looked into the last time, and that was around the time that Captain Cook arrived in Australia and I guess started off this whole issue for the Indigenous cultures of Australia. And then the time before that was when Queen Elizabeth was born with Pluto in Aquarius, and she was the one that was really responsible for sending out all of these ships around the world to colonize, and which started this whole colonization story. And as I don't really listen to the news, and so in November when Pluto went into Aquarius, I just asked my friends who do listen to the news. I said, "What's happening with anything happening in the Indigenous issues this week?" And then someone said about the haka and in Parliament, and I thought, oh well, that's right on cue. So I guess that all that to say is that I have watched the Pluto and Aquarius story very much about this whole idea about humanity changing and shifting power dynamics at some level, and we will see the ugly side and the shadow sides of human nature come about, sadly. But equally, I think there's the empowerment of the people that are rising as well. And the other connections, I guess, to Pluto and Aquarius is last year when I presented at another Kepler event, I did discuss about Graham Hancock's new Apocalypse documentary being released at that time, and talking about, the whole civilization being wiped out. And that was connected to the birth of Jacques Cuvier, who was the scientist that was responsible for this catastrophic crisis theory on human evolution. And so, all of these kind of things have kind of built this picture into my mind that we will be changing as human beings. That we might not feel it that viscerally because this is such a big outer planet, but looking back, we are going to, as a group of people collectively living on this world, there is almost no going back now that Pluto is in Aquarius. We're cementing in this new change, and you're in for this big long ride.
Yeah, I think another interesting piece of news was what was happening in South Korea as well. That was a bunch of people saying no, and they did it really strongly and powerfully against a tyrannical situation. So, yeah.
That was Mars retrograde, where the leader declared martial law, like out of nowhere. And the people said, oh, no, you don't.
No, you don't.
Picking up on your
Yeah.
guys' point, historically, this has been written about at length, but Pluto and Aquarius historically been tied to revolutions, whether it was the American Revolution. Now, many people focus on the Sibley chart when you had Pluto at the last degrees of Capricorn, but if you actually go back to the Treaty of Paris, that was the official breaking and the independence of America from the British, and that had Pluto at 8 degrees Aquarius. So that'll be really interesting once we see Pluto get to 8 degrees. Now, the French Revolution, I believe, happened, I've got it down here, 18 degrees Aquarius, deep into there. So maybe this push on the positive end of Pluto and Aquarius to a more egalitarian way of doing things and moving away from that Capricornian hierarchy, where, of course, now we've got the wealth concentrated so solely in the top 1%. So I wonder, those themes of Celeste, Stu, and Stevie, you're saying of revolution, power to the people, I wonder if that's going to be a theme for the next 20 years, where people have said, we've had enough, it's time to bring the power back to the people.
Absolutely. I mean, we're seeing like, oh, what's going on with the cabinet positions and everything with the US. It's so Pluto at that last degree of Capricorn, which we're past now. So I think the reaction to that is coming. But we have all this retrograde energy through April. So I feel like the year really takes off maybe when Neptune goes into Aries.
There's a couple of
There's-
questions as well, which I only saw in the chat, but about cryptocurrency. And I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on this, because it's not Satoshi brought in Bitcoin when it was the crash in Pluto and Capricorn at the end of, what was it, 2008. And as we go through these next 20 years with Pluto and Aquarius, if there's one way of maybe taking on the establishment is maybe taking back the financial control. Now, is that going to be through decentralized cryptocurrencies, where you move away from the traditional banks where they can do all the numbers behind closed doors? But with cryptocurrency, it's on a blockchain, and I'm just thinking of air with Pluto and Aquarius, it can't be changed. Like it's transparent, which it hasn't been for so many decades. So what are your guys' thoughts on cryptocurrency?
Well, I don't know a whole lot about cryptocurrency specifically, but I think the whole idea of digital currencies is going to be a big issue. And both, like what you said, the positive aspects of it, where people are trying to gain a more transparent system, but also the more negative aspects of it, where the current structures are going to be grasping at control and wanting to get everyone onto their own digital currencies to then start tracking and monitoring and controlling everyone's finances from that end. So I think this is a big topic that's going to be playing out over the next 20 years with Pluto in Aquarius, like using technology to manage the money and both the empowerment and the shadow aspects of that. So I guess it's a matter of like bracing yourself for that and your own financial freedom and what you plan to do for that. And there's obviously some things that are out of our control, but I know there are people that are out there sort of moving back into stepping away from technology and putting their resources into more tangible. We saw that with Jupiter in Taurus, putting their resources into more tangible things like buying gold, buying silver. I know in my local community here, there is a very strong established community now of trading in silver and trading in points, a point system. But I know that's not the norm at this stage, but we can see more of these kinds of alternative economies kind of building up in response to these broader digital currency push, like CBDCs. So yeah, that's a big minefield.
Okay, should we move on to the next question? Okay, this is from Angel. And Angel, if I don't get this exactly right, just pop more clarification in the chat box. So the question is, what do you think will happen with Earth shifting, the divide, kind of like the divides that we're seeing between two, large groups of people?
Yeah, well, so is this not the literal earth shifting? It's an
Well, I'm not
metaphorical.
sure. Angel says, what do you think will happen with earth shifting, ? Divides? So let me see if
Right.
ocean plates actually. Okay, she meant ocean.
Oh, okay. Well, that's very Pluto, moving signs.
Mm.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know much about that, but I mean, I think it certainly fits the whole idea of tectonic plates and the Pluto connection there. But I thought maybe Angel might have been alluding to the whole differing power systems of the what do they call it, like the nations that are coming up, like the BRICS nations, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and that alliance is now growing to be quite a force, and I see that to be quite a reaction to the whole Pluto and Aquarius theme. But yes, this earth shifting tectonic plates, yeah, I'm not sure about that, but it definitely fits the symbology of Pluto shifting signs.
I think it's a lot about climate change too. I mean, I think Uranus going into Gemini, trine Pluto and Aquarius is, to me, winds picking up. And yeah, and a lot of instability for the people, the populace, the Aquarius, and as well as with both of them sextiling Saturn, Neptune, and it's going to meet on a world point of 0 Aries. We're entering a whole new paradigm, I feel like, with the weather will be one of the biggest topics.
And just like the natural resources that it takes to have so much technology as well, and kind of battling with that, I think.
Yeah, doesn't cryptocurrency, isn't it horrible for the planet?
I guess in that last forecast that we did, that you can get the recording of, Carl, who does weather astrology based on the weather, did a whole forecast of the weather for 2025, and it was fascinating. So that's definitely a good resource to check out.
What do you think about P. Diddy and his trial coming up on May 5th during his lunar and nodal return, and just when Pluto stations? That's from Fatima.
Well, one of my predictions was that more celebrities, Mars retrograde in Leo, pulling back the tape on the sexual stuff. And we already saw Jay-Z has come to light. Pluto and Aquarius, opposite Leo planets. I think we're going to be seeing the downfall of some of these people who had gotten away with abusing masses of people for quite a while. And Jay-Z is just alleged. We haven't seen anything like we saw with he did on video, him beating up his ex-girlfriend. But yeah, he's justice. His karma is being his karma is coming due. Is due. He's in jail.
And I think by sign, I think P. Diddy's got a lot of Scorpio planets, I believe. So I don't know by sign that Pluto and Aquarius is going to be.
He's got Mercury in Scorpio opposite Saturn in Taurus. And his Mars is at 29 Capricorn. So this whole thing was coming up, to a head with Pluto on his Mars.
He might be SOL.
Unearthing, revealing his brutality towards people.
This is from Chelsea. Could the panelists lend their thoughts on how the out of bounds moon would add to Pluto going in and out of bounds between 2025 and 2035 in Aquarius? Curious as to what y'all think about the people of the US with moon in Aquarius, how they might experience this.
Well, from what I understand, Pluto is out of bounds for a lot of the time. So it's kind of a natural backdrop, and it kind of is characteristic of the planet's qualities. I think what's more important would be the out of bounds Mars and the moon. doing its thing there the first quarter of the year, because that's something that doesn't happen as often, and it would therefore then make a bigger splash. But surely having Pluto there thrown in the mix does add, I guess, that another dimension to that. So and I'm not big on I don't know much about the US stuff, so I'll leave it to the Americans.
Celeste, Stevie, any thoughts?
Oh, I just think as Pluto gets closer and closer to the moon of the United States, which is at 27 Aquarius, so we've got a ways off. You know, we're undergoing a tremendous changes that are going to be happening pretty fast.
Yeah, I'm sort of with Shu on it too. Just the frequency of the declination for Pluto is a little different. And so yeah, I think when it gets closer to the actual moon, or when it's getting triggered by transiting planets, that maybe we'll see protest movements or uprisings during those times.
I want to mention quickly, I noticed when I asked the question of people having out of bounds planets, there's a lot of people with out of bounds moons planets, which includes myself. But really good video if you haven't seen it before, Stephen Forrest. Just go into YouTube, type in out of bounds moon, Stephen Forrest, and it's absolutely brilliant. And so if you've got an out of bounds moon, certainly check that out.
There was a question kind of going back to the previous conversation, and it's about the crypto and Elon Musk kind of getting involved with President-elect Trump. And do you think that the people really have control? That's the question.
No, I was listening to something about like this cryptocurrency stuff, like putting the US money into this could be like just a heist by the elites of stealing more resources. So we'll see.
It's kind of like
go on, Laurie. Sorry.
I was just going to quickly say, in psychology with behavioral interventions, there's this saying that it has to get worse before it gets better. If that's the case, it may be, how far can we push this before the people say we want something different?
I think what we can all do really is to work on our community resilience, and that's what the Aquarian nature might bring. Like get a community around you, supportive people around you. Start looking at ways that you can grow your own food and be more resilient to be able to produce and to trade and barter, and to not have to rely on external systems as much as you can. Maybe it's doing things like changing your financial situations, like diversifying into gold or silver and other resources that are more tangible, because it's I think community resilience is going to be one of the most important things to be able to, if you want to maintain some level of control and power, that's one thing that you can do now to start to build that. Yeah, that along with some magic and sorcery as well.
Heck yeah.
I will say one word on cryptocurrency, because I'm heavily invested and I spend a lot of time in the crypto world. I think there's a difference and a push and pull between what they call is KYC, which a lot of these centralized exchanges want to know all your information. So Shu, I think you're correct in there is elements of the traditional financial institutions like BlackRock, all those kind of institutions, governments wanting to keep tabs on people with cryptocurrency. I think my advice, and not financial advice, is you can find actually DeFi projects, which are decentralized projects, where there's one called Pulse Chain and a few others, where there's now a shift moving away from these centralized exchanges. And a lot of people can get hardware wallets, and they always say, not your keys, not your coins. So I think there's another push away from that, because there are actually decentralized ones where governments can't get hold of them because they have nodes all around the world. So there's not one government that can switch them off. So people might be bored of this, but just check out decentralized cryptocurrency. And I think that might be the positive way forward to stop centralized governments getting their dirty hands in the way. So that's just my thoughts.
Yeah, great. So build that into your resilience plan.
Exactly.
Yeah, and expect that it will happen, because I think the most stark thing about this relationship between Elon and Trump is that they call themselves outsiders, but they are really the Leo kings and we are the Aquarian people on the outside. So we just can't ever forget that they aren't these radical change making fringe people. They're people who have just a lot of control and influence.
Yeah. And Christina brought up a good point about, the South Node in Virgo with these tariffs and all this other stuff that's going on. Like if you can have your own garden or what have you, there's going to be a lot about land and resources, potentially food shortages. If all these migrants are expelled, who's going to pick the food, transport it? I mean, it's we're in for something in 2025. Changes around these topics.
Well, that's a good segue to the next question. With Neptune and Saturn and Aries in 2025, will the increased interest in astrology, travel, and relocation and social media continue?
Absolutely. I mean, the NORWAC conference is already sold out for next year. And we have UAC coming up September 3rd through 9th of 2026. I think we're going to see more and more and more people. Uranus and Gemini. Will kids start learning astrology?
I think travel's going to be increasingly more difficult and unaffordable. So, yeah, I'm not sure what's going to be happening in the travel industry. I think I would try and, get your holidays in sooner rather than later before it's totally impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
vacationing at home. Well, Jupiter and Gemini is like, stay close to home. And we've got this square coming up, Jupiter and Saturn on the 24th. I think we'll be seeing stuff about travel in the news.
Neptune going into Aries, the social media situation. I think it's going to be sextiling Pluto, so the deep fakes are going to be even worse. There's like a bunch of just like it might be very difficult to tell if you're talking to a real person or not. We have to figure out ways to validate who we want to buy from and exchange any kind of ideas with online. It could just be a completely AI at that point. So
yeah, that's a good point, because I do see the Uranus going into Gemini. It's a whiles off yet, but I see that as being huge in terms of propaganda and news organizations and, not knowing what to believe. And interestingly, we have just seen the recent trial hearing results of the Murdoch family case. Not sure if you've heard about that. Rupert Murdoch, who retired last year at 93, is wanting to leave his legacy to Lachlan, his only child that shares his own political views, which is more conservative. But if they can't change the trust, the three remaining siblings will most likely vote Lachlan's position and basically change his media organizations and make it more change the political stance. So the trial hearing was just released this week, and he did lose that trial. And he will appeal, but it's interesting that I think this is going to feed into the Neptune in Aries, but also the Uranus going into Gemini story in the future, and what to believe and what not to.
I actually want to touch on your point, Shu. Sorry, I'm not a panelist. I can't help myself. But Shu, you're talking about the difficulty with traveling. And I just can't help but think what's going on around the world recently with a lot of local people revolting against tourism. So anybody here, if you're in those places, I've not been back to Europe for a while, but I think you had like Barcelona, Amsterdam, a few other countries around the world where they're just saying enough with the tourism. It's soaking up all of the activity, the destruction of the environment, and local people not being able to find the resources, or the rents are too high. So I wonder, tying in with your thoughts on travel restrictions. I wonder if that'll tie in as well with local people just saying, we've had enough. It's just too many people right now.
Yeah, and Jupiter in Cancer, loving the homeland, square Saturn in Aries.
Great point.
Anger increasing about.
Yeah, I think the first half of the first quarter, at least, of this 2025 year is really getting people up to that boiling point, and then from that, things will emerge. Major decisions, major actions as a result of this boiling point, and there will be tensions and there will be escalations. I feel. So yeah, one of which, it's a great point about the tourism. At some levels, there's some countries rely on that tourism, so it's a tricky one. Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to say is I see Neptune and Aries could be, and Saturn, burning witches at the stake is something that's come to me. So there was a few months ago, it was so strange where, what's his name? Tucker Carlson was talking about how he was attacked by a demon in his bed. And then recently in Jamaica or Haiti, there were people who were put to death for being witches or something like that. And with the North Node going into Pisces, I feel like this is, and Saturn, Neptune and Aries, that's something to really pay attention to. If there be some demonization of,
Interesting. Yeah,
with Project 2025, like the religious stuff really amplifying in the US.
You think on that note, astrologers might be under attack? I mean, be accused, all of us accused of
Potential.
witchcraft, and then I'll be up there on a spike with the rest of us, set on
I
fire.
am a little concerned. I am a little concerned.
We better get some magic happening for you, Callum.
Oh, Laurie, muted.
Laurie, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I was just going to say, let's do one more question. I know we're past our time, but let's just, if you don't mind, we'll do the one last question, and I think we'll wrap up. The question is, the US 2025 inauguration has Sun-Pluto conjunct and at the top of the chart. Any ideas as to what this could mean?
Felt like the leader is obscured, came to me.
Yeah, I think Trump should be worried. Not that I condone violence, but just with his history already, we know that it's dangerous being hated by so many people.
Chart does not look good. That's part of why I didn't think he was gonna win. He's got a lot of volatile energy. And with the US, also the midheaven is 1 degrees of Libra, and Jupiter, when Jupiter squares Saturn in June, it's at 1 degrees, Jupiter at 1 degrees of Cancer in the 8th house of the US, square 1 degrees of Aries. Like, it's really activating that whoever the president, is. And it doesn't look positive to me, but we'll see. It's going to be really interesting. The Jupiter in Cancer square Saturn in Aries, Jupiter exalted Saturn in fall. I think really paying attention to how that shows up is going to be really interesting to see. I'm still thinking about that one.
I think people are in for a rude awakening if they think this administration is going to be looking out for the common man. I mean, the last administration, the biggest thing was the tax cuts. I mean, I don't want to get too political, but I just think there'll be an unveiling of the facade. And again, if people think they're looking out for the working man and woman and the common people, they're in for a rude awakening, I think.
Not with the South Node in Virgo. Absolutely not.
Okay, well, this was a wonderful webinar. It's what we're now calling a special edition panel webinar, and we have another one coming up in January. Thanks to all of you who stayed late with us. We really appreciate it. Love all the hearts that are coming up. So hopefully, if you're interested in astro mapping, which is just a fascinating technique, and has been just really growing, I think, in the astrological community. Please join us. All of our faculty members in that certificate will be there, and we're going to look at Amelia Earhart's chart. So hope to see you in January. This is our last webinar of 2024. We're saying goodbye 2024. Hello.
We should make this a yearly event. I've really enjoyed this with all our panelists. We should do this
Let's
every
do
year.
it. Yes, we'll do it again next year. And so, yeah, so thank you, everyone. Happy New Year. Be safe out there.